Hi, everyone. I'm Diane Macedo. You've just been watching President Biden deliver remarks on the jobs report. 235,000 jobs were added in August. The president pointed to that number, saying it does show the economy is still growing, but it is well below what analysts were expecting. Experts say that's likely due to the spread of the COVID Delta variant. The unemployment rate also fell slightly to 5.2%. And so for more on this, let's bring in Diane Swonk, an economist at Grant Thornton, and ABC News political director Rick Klein. Thank you both for being here. Diane, I'll start with you. The president tried to put a positive spin on this, but you called today's jobs number gut-wrenching. Why? What does it tell you about the state of the economy right now?
Well, what's really hard is it's occurring at the time when we've seen millions of people that are going to lose expansions and supplements to unemployment insurance on September 6th. And conditions will likely get worse before they get better because we have the collision of both COVID and climate change with Hurricane Ida and the disruptions it's causing across the country, even in the Northeast. It really stunning to see the flooding out there. That's going to show up in September and October, along with the worst effects of Delta. This jobs number had imprint of Delta all over it. We saw flatline hiring in leisure and hospitality, actual declines at restaurants. Hotspots, we know, mobility actually slowed in those places hardest hit by the Delta variant. As hospitalizations and fatalities pick up, that's when people pull back the most. We know that's regardless of any restrictions, and sure enough, it showed up in the data. We also saw losses in retail. And one of the ironies of this health crisis and pandemic has been the losses in healthcare. We know that the cancellation of elective surgeries is occurring. That's going to slow down healthcare employment. But we also are seeing continued losses, 17 out of 18 months of losses in nursing homes because people that they were hardest hit by the Delta variant and they will not return to those jobs. We also have reports of people walking off the job in during the middle of their shift because of the frustration working and dealing with COVID patients that have not been vaccinated. It really is devastating. So sadly, I think this is a prelude to additional weakness. And it's not just the supply side of the labor market not showing up. It's now demand as well.
And Rick, a new ABC News Washington Post poll out today shows that just 44% of Americans currently approve of the job President Biden is doing in the wake of the U.S. exit from Afghanistan. Now, if the economy continues to come out with numbers like this, how much will that impact him politically?
Yeah, these numbers really are driven by Afghanistan, but they could spill over into other aspects of the Biden agenda. I think it's notable that just yesterday, Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia came out against that $3.5 trillion package that Biden today spent some time talking up as a potential solution for the economic woes that still face this country. Even as he put an optimistic spin on some very disappointing numbers, he used it to try to make this case. And that's where his personal appeal, his popularity, his approval comes into play. So much of the Democratic agenda has been predicated on the idea that we have a president that's relatively popular, pushing relatively popular ideas. But to the extent that that changes, whether because of Afghanistan or COVID or the economy, there goes a whole lot of political capital, and it makes anything that Biden and the Democrats want to do that much more difficult. It's kind of a vicious cycle that begins to set in once you see numbers begin to dip. So we'll have to see if this is a one-time thing. These were by far the lowest numbers on approval ratings in his presidency in our ABC News Washington Post polling. We know it came at a time of a very difficult month between the Delta variant, between concerns around the economy that we're seeing now, and of course the Afghanistan pullout and a lot of really bad meteorological events as well. So all of this is happening at a very difficult moment for the country, and a very difficult moment for the president and his presidency, as I think we saw reflected in those comments a moment ago.
Yeah, it sure is. And Diane, we heard the president there pointing the finger at Republicans, saying none of them support this $3.5 trillion so-called human infrastructure package. But as Rick just mentioned, Senator Joe Manchin, and they need all the Democrats on board here. Now Senator Joe Manchin is advising scaling that back and putting a pause on that as well. You know, is it unreasonable to have concerns right now about spending $3.5 trillion in an economy with debt in question and also with inflation in question?
It's not unreasonable. I have questions about it. I was a long-term deficit hawk, and I've been humbled by how low interest rates have been able to go and how much stimulus we've been able to provide in terms of emergency aid and stimulus through the pandemic. And we really do need infrastructure, and we do need some of those programs, probably not in that I wouldn't go as large as they did, and I do think we need to pay for things. We need to pay for consumption. We should finance investment in infrastructure. That's something that just is sort of an economic paradigm that doesn't seem to fly in Washington. But I think there's a very interesting issue going on here, is that as of March, when we got that $1.9 trillion in emergency aid and stimulus, we were on a trajectory to exceed the growth path we were on prior to the pandemic. We have not done that since the 1980s. Those dividends of that earlier stimulus are now being lost because of the continued contagion and fear of contagion we see out there, the Delta variant, and then you layer the disruptions due to extreme climate events on top of it. And that is going to be really hard as we get into 2022. We're disrupting both supply and demand. If you disrupt the supply more than demand, you're going to have more residual inflation in a slower growth economy. If it flips around and you start suppressing demand even more, inflation will cool. But at what price in terms of not gaining back the jobs lost due to the pandemic?
And Rick, the president did stress today that one of the big things we have to do to improve the economy is improve the fight against this pandemic. He alluded in this speech to the fact that next week he'll be unveiling more plans along those lines. Is there any sense of what the White House is going to talk about there?
Not yet, Diane. I think that there's a recognition at the White House that is the whole ballgame when it comes to the presidency and what he's able to accomplish. Everything really is tied to perceptions around COVID-19. I mentioned this long summer. We talked earlier it wasn't that long ago that it looked like July 4th might be the way that this country was coming out of it. Clearly, there's a lot of frustration around that. We've seen some encouraging signs around vaccinations, but I haven't heard any new ideas. And frankly, there may not be any. It may be that the people that are putting out the messaging now around the need to get vaccinated, the need to adhere to guidelines, are the least likely to be trusted or listened to by the people that need to hear the message. So it is a kind of a stalemate moment. We'll have to see if the White House has some new concepts or new ideas around this, because so much of that is, of course, tied to the recovery from COVID-19.
And Diane, enhanced unemployment benefits are also set to expire on Monday. How big of an impact do you think that will have?
It's a huge impact at a time when it's going to be harder for those workers to find jobs. And I think that's really important. We've seen many workers that are dealing with childcare, and the fact that schools reopened, that was supposed to bring a lot of workers back into the labor force, particularly single mothers. Hispanic mothers have been hit the hardest by both the job losses and their ability to return to the labor force. The problem is that as schools reopen, they've been forced into quarantine again or gone back online. And these are kind of the hurdles that we face as we go into the fall. And that's what we're really concerned about, is that the Delta variant's really going to overshadow that.
Rick, is there any effort in play to try to extend those benefits? And politically, could the Democrats get that done, given how many employers are complaining about how difficult it is to get staff right now?
I don't see it. I don't see it. You're seeing already Democratic governors and mayors begin to come around on this and to stop the extensions. I don't see a realistic path forward on that. And that is one of the striking things in this job report, is that there are a lot of people who are still looking for jobs. Also, a lot of people who aren't looking for jobs and are otherwise classified as unemployed. And that's part of the challenge now. We still hear reports, even with the Delta surge and the slowdown, of employers that are desperately looking to get a better workforce out there. And again, President Biden put his best spin on it today, talking about the continuity of job growth over his time in office. But there's no putting aside the fact that this was a disappointing number, driven by Delta, driven by other concerns that this country has right now. These things are tied together, and however the president wants to spin that and trying to push it forward, I think a lot of the big stimulus and the enhancements on unemployment and the like, that's a thing of the past.
All right, Diane Swonk, Rick Klein, thank you both so much.
Thank you.